All right. Well, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be. Want to welcome everybody to this month's Beyond Compliance webinar and podcast series. My name is Brian Sharp with SafetyChain Software, and first want to thank everybody for making some time during what I know is a very, very busy time of year for many of you. We've got a very special edition of the Beyond Compliance series today, in that we get to dive into one of your peers and talk about a customer success case study with our friends and customers over at Albertsons Companies. And they've been kind enough to carve some time out of their busy schedule to join us and share a little bit about the process they've gone through with us here at SafetyChain and how they've really transformed operations with our food quality management software. So more on that to come, but we got a lot of good stuff. And I think, given the interest level in this webinar, we're really excited to be able to share this insight into how they're using the software and how that could potentially help some of you. For those of you that may be new to the series, Beyond Compliance is something we started a little over a year ago with feedback. We've obviously been doing our FSMA Fridays and things like that for over 5 years. And, they were more industry related. And the idea behind this series is to do exactly what we're doing today, right? Get in the trenches, talk about best practices, trends, strategies, different tools that are being used, and try and provide you some really relevant, practical things that you can take away and apply in your own organizations. And so we do these for you. This is for that food safety and quality community that we are a part of. And so we welcome any ideas, even specific topics or presenters that you'd like to hear more about. And you keep coming, we'll keep doing them. It's been really fun to see this thing take off and grow to such a large audience. So thank you for being here. And if you're new, we hope you'll enjoy it and come on back. Obviously, there's no charge for these. This is something that we believe in helping cultivate with our community and giving back. And as sponsors, we're very proud of that. So if you're not familiar with us at SafetyChain, we're a cloud-based food quality management system, and we're exclusively focused on the food and beverage industry, helping them drive productivity, profitability, and compliance. And we do that with a variety of different solutions, primarily focused around food safety, quality, and supplier compliance modules. And we've got a lot of exciting new stuff coming out. And I think what I'm most excited about today, this is kind of our show and tell. It's fun to really have someone show you in the trenches what's going on and how they're using technology. But you can learn more at our website there, and we'd certainly love to talk about how it might be able to help you with some of your technology initiatives coming up in the coming year. Few housekeeping things. I know many of you are on GoToMeetings and webinars every day, all day, it seems like. So I think a lot of this goes without saying. But in terms of our format, we'd like to keep this pretty informal and conversational. We will try and address some of the questions. In a case study environment, we try and respect the proprietary issues and privacy factors. We want to, kind of figure out what would be helpful to address and what we can take offline. But we'll do our best to field some questions if we can. If not, we'll take those offline. You'll notice on the right-hand side in your panel, a couple things you can use over there. One is to ask questions. So that's where you will fire those off. The other, you'll notice, just yourself, only the panelists, and you are listed there. So if you do have a question, it's not being fired off to everybody publicly there. Try and knock out the most common question, and that is the recording link. And yes, we will be recording this, and we'll have this as part of our library, and certainly something that you can share with your colleagues that maybe weren't able to join today. And last but not least, we are on a webinar tool, so we've all had those call-in and audio things. We've got a lot of people on the line today, so if for some reason you do experience an audio issue, we do have one of our team members behind the scenes monitoring any questions you'll have. You can fire those off in the chat box or in the questions. We'll do our best to help you out. Usually the go-to move, not surprisingly, is the old log out, log in, or just switch from computer to phone audio. So we'll do our best to help you if you have any issues there. But don't worry if you do. We are recording, and we'll make sure and get a copy of this to you. So with that, I'm really excited to jump into the topic today, and I want to set a couple of ground rules, since it's a bit of a different approach than we get to do on our consistent series. One is that while this is a case study and it's a customer and it's something we're super proud of, and we can't wait to show you and talk about what they've done with the technology. And this is going to be Safety Chain centric. We hope you find a lot of value in that and see the value that we add. That said, I think the other big takeaway, our hope here, and I shared this with Mark, is that you get to learn from a peer. And so regardless of whether you're a SafetyChain customer or not, we recognize not everybody on the line is. We hope you are someday, and we hope this exposure gives you an opportunity to engage with us. But we also hope that regardless of the technology you're using, what type of projects, I think there's a lot of really great tangible takeaways Mark's going to share today. So we're trying to come at you with two tracks and two ways to really add some value today. So our approach today is going to talk a little bit about the project, what led up to the project, how their team went about it, some things that they learned, the good stuff and the hard stuff, and then probably most importantly, spend a little time as we wrap up about really the impact that it's making, because I think that's where the real value is for everybody with this. So. With that, I'm going to introduce the man of the hour, and certainly the one you'd much rather listen to than myself, and that's Mark Salimbene. And so first, Mark, I'll make sure that you can hear me okay.
Yes, I can. Thank you, Brian.
Awesome. You sound great. Well, we're really excited to have you, and I'm very grateful for you making time in your busy schedule, literally flying all over the place, this guy. So we tracked him down, and I'd like to give you a quick background on Mark, because I think his breadth of experience really will be helpful to have as context as we go into this. Mark Salimbene is the Senior Director of Quality Assurance for Albertsons Companies, LLC. Mark has over 38 years experience in the food industry with primary background in quality assurance, product development, food safety, and regulatory compliance for product manufacturing. Mark has held his positions with Albertsons and prior to that with Safeway for almost 22 years in the San Francisco, California area. Currently, Mark has responsibility for quality and food safety of all Albertsons manufacturing facilities. He leads a group of over 50 quality professionals throughout the U.S. in 20 manufacturing facilities that include dairy, beverage, bakery, frozen desserts, sauces, bottled water, and prepared foods. So you can imagine he sees a little bit of everything. Mark holds a bachelor's degree in food science and nutrition from The Ohio State University and an MBA from Murray State University. So great amount of expertise and experience, and welcome. Now that we know a little about you, Mark, I thought it might be helpful just at a real high level for those that may not be as familiar with some of the banners that you oversee, maybe talk a little bit about the Albertsons Companies too, just so we have a little bit of context there.
Sure, and thank you for emphasizing the and the Ohio State University.
I'm trying to make you proud. There you go.
Yeah, so Albertsons Companies is actually headquartered in Boise, as most everybody knows, and we operate retail stores in many of the states, United States, across 20 well-known banners. Albertsons, Safeway, Vons, Jewel, Osco, Randall's, Tom Thumb, Cars, Shaw's, Acme, and Jewel in Chicago. And so we manufacture and provide products to all of the divisions that operating under the Albertsons banner.
Excellent. Hey, got your hands full for sure there. So I think what would be good to give some additional context now at the project scope and the project level. We meet a lot of people, Mark, that are trying to figure out where to start, and you guys, had grand visions and really took on a lot here. And I think that's what makes it such a great story to share. So can you talk a little bit about, as you started down this path, we're thinking about the project, what it was you were looking for put in and kind of where that was going to be placed within your organization?
Sure. So we started this process probably a year and a half to 2 years prior to really actually making the decision and signing on with SafetyChain, and really trying to understand how we could close a lot of the gaps we had around paperwork, process control, SOPs, and of course with FSMA, preventive controls. And as we kept trying to solve operational problems, we continued to add SOPs on top of SOPs and process controls on top of process controls, and it became a paper nightmare. And we're in the 21st century. We thought it was time to make the change and go to a digital format for all record keeping. And so that was really the key driver. It was the amount of paper that we had people shuffling through on a daily basis that really caused us to pause and say we need to do something differently. And if you also think about paper, paper is really just two-dimensional. It's really a record, and it's not. Right. It doesn't really control anything. And so you see the record maybe after the fact, but it doesn't really provide any real-time control. And we also knew we were missing that piece in our manufacturing operations. So that was the key drivers, and we wanted to find a solution that could offer opportunities for us in food safety, quality assurance, and then supplier compliance. Supplier compliance, as you know, is a big part of FSMA, and all food manufacturers under the FDA have to provide a supplier approval program. And so we were looking for something for all of our raw material and packaging suppliers. We also needed to understand that our product manufacturing scope was pretty broad. We're not just in one category, we're in multiple food categories. And so we needed a solution that could fit all of those different food processing facilities. As Brian mentioned, we manufacture, all the dairy products, fluid milk, cultured products, beverages, bottled water, frozen desserts, breads, rolls, buns. We even started manufacturing our own prepared soups. And we make prepared holiday meals and even ice. So our product categories are broad, and so this system or solution had to be able to be used across all of that. And then lastly, you really needed to consider what were the gaps in our current programs and what would be the best tools to succeed. And so that's how we went about trying to find the right solution for us and what the project really was.
No, that's perfect. So, and I think that's what made this such a good fit. You were looking for that holistic approach in all of those areas. And so as we had this slide here talking about some of the technology challenges that you were looking to face, or challenges that we're facing, you wanted to use technology rather. You've touched on some of those, right? The inefficiencies of paper and pen. I like that two-dimensional piece. You talk a little bit about transparency, and you mentioned that real briefly. Can you share a little bit about, because you have a big organization, you got people all over the place, 20 different facilities. What was it that you were looking to help your team with, or how was it going to help you to work on that transparency piece?
Yeah, so we have manufacturing facilities across multiple states. And, we can't be at all places at one time. We have a small corporate staff and then a large manufacturing staff that, we work with to manufacture the products. And we didn't have visibility to what they were actually doing with their records in the facility and the documentation. Unless you actually went and visited the facility, you really couldn't see what was actually happening. And so we wanted a tool that could give us the ability to look and see who's using what forms, what records have been created, what issues have occurred, and we can actually now do that on a real-time basis. The other thing is we had multiple, let's say, like plants, where, say, fluid milk plants, and we realized we didn't really have good standardization. So we wanted to use this, obviously, to help standardize what we were doing.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because one thing that we get the chance to talk to a lot of people in a lot of variety of industries and company sizes, and it's fun. You look at someone like you and you think, oh, they have all these resources and all that, and I say a bit of that tongue in cheek because it's more complicated. You have a lot of the same challenges companies big and small have. So I thought that was great that you shared that, and I appreciate you doing that. And really, as you pointed out, it all came down to leveraging that data, right? Getting it so you can drive that continuous improvement. And I think that was really helpful, and something that we hear a lot across, regardless of company size or vertical. So
yeah, if you think about it,
go ahead.
If you think about it, data on a piece of paper is not really actionable. You really can't do anything with it unless you somehow have a means to collect all that data into some other tool that you can use then to provide some real insight of what's going on. And so that's another problem that paper offers, and we're looking for a solution that could provide us some analytical tools.
Perfect. Yep, that's good. And that's been a fun part of watching this thing evolve. And you've been really proactive about that. I like that paper's not actionable. So let's shift a little bit to the project. And I think this is again one of those spots where your peers can take away, regardless of the type of project. You guys did some things really well in this area that set you up for success, and as this thing continues and grows and the partnership evolves. So before the implementation, there's definitely some considerations that, as you and I spoke, you shared that you kind of looking back, you thought, these were really important things we had to start thinking about. And you took the time to do that. And I want to point that out to everybody that, as I don't want to dismiss that time that you were talking about before starting up with us. And so maybe you can talk through a few of these that you shared with me here, Mark.
Sure. When we started the project, we had to think about how we could be the most impactful, at least get the biggest bang for the buck from the beginning. And so that was one of the areas where we wanted to make sure that we succeeded in. We also realized that if we're going to a mobile solution and looking to have real-time data capability, lack of Wi-Fi doesn't really get you there. And we had to ensure that we were going to upgrade all of our manufacturing facilities across all the square footage of those facilities with Wi-Fi capability, so that people walking around with mobile tablets could enter and submit data.
Sure.
So that was a big project, and it's anybody who's familiar with installing Wi-Fi, it's not just like hooking up a router in your house. It's a much bigger project to do it with this much bandwidth. And then we also, as I mentioned, we also wanted to find the way that was most impactful. So we decided to zero in on our fluid milk plants because we had the most milk plants of all, and we felt that was the most consistent across those facilities, and that's where we prioritized our rollout. And so we began that process with an on-site meeting, and we kicked it off from that point. I think the last piece is that, when you're going from, 100-year-old technology, i.e. paper and pencil, to, the digital age, right? You have to make sure that your workforce is ready to accept those changes. And we spent some time training and educating all of our staff on what this was going to do for us, both the benefits and, help them in their current roles, so that, they would embrace the technology and they would be more of a partner in helping us to achieve our objectives instead of the other way.
Yeah, and that was one of my favorites. And I think just from the vendor side, the technology side, to say that your company has been one of the best partners of ours in that sense, and that you bring us and we're involved with that, and to see the engagement from your teams and everybody down to the operations level on the floor, it makes a big difference, and it's helped make some adjustments and improvements, and helped us become better as a company. So I think you've done a really great job there, and I would love to highlight that third one is one of the things that we see from our side make one of the greatest, as you said, bangs for the buck, right? Get the most out of technology is when it's only as good as those that are using it, right? So, and the Wi-Fi, you make a good point. Although I think some of us could argue, my kids play Fortnite, and I would tell you, hooking up Wi-Fi now in your house is a big deal. Like, if my bandwidth is not good, it gets ugly quick. So, but it's nothing like doing your facilities, that's for sure. But one thing I do want to point out, some people have asked about that, and if you're thinking, wow, that's a big ask for me and my organization, one thing that's important to note, at least about SafetyChain, is that our tools do work in an offline mode. It doesn't necessarily solve the real-time piece that Mark was talking about, and that is important, but you still have the ability to use some of the tools in that mode. So one quick note there for everybody. So let's talk a little bit now about, you had a little bit of distance now to kind of look back, and this is where seeing what really worked, right? Now that you've gone through the primary implementation and you're seeing what's working and what's driving the success. And there's a lot more to come. I think we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg, frankly. But there's some things I think you noted in our discussion that you're seeing were really keys to success for your team thus far. You want to talk a little bit about those, Mark?
Sure. And I have to give credit to the SafetyChain team, because my first thoughts on, how to implement were pretty much all wrong. I had thought we would go plant by plant, and instead it was discussed and urged that we should probably go program by program, meaning we should start with receiving program and then go on to quality program and then a processing program and then roll out through that type of format. So that worked out really well. That was, to me, one of the keys to success. If we had gone plant by plant, we would still be working through that. So that was one of the big keys. Yeah. And then also, I think it's also important that when you start this project, you really need to have the end goal in mind, meaning when you want to have it all implemented and in place. Because once you lay that out, then you really have to get everybody who's going to be involved in implementing this on board with you. And so having that comprehensive rollout and training plan laid out up front, I think, has been very critical. I'd already talked about staff communication, and again, making sure everybody is on board with what we're trying to achieve, and knowing that, we're working to make their job easier and also provide more impactful information to us for quicker decision making. Then that was, to me, one of our, I think, bigger bangs for the buck, and making sure we had strong staff communication. And then lastly, on that, we realized that you had to have a centralized project coordination. You couldn't allow this to be implemented at the plant level. It really needed to be driven down to the plant, and then obviously getting the key players there involved, particularly those who have a passion around this, to be your champions, and then work it that way. And so that was another, I think, a key to success for us, is making sure that we didn't allow the plants to pick and choose what they wanted to do. We basically laid out the plan for them. And then lastly, of course, getting all the corporate staff involved, that, our backstage staff that could help assist in this. I think that is also key to success.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to touch on there that partnership we had in the implementation approach. I appreciate how you said that. I think equally important was that centralized project coordination, because in order to help make those best decisions, get too many cooks in the kitchen, for lack of a better phrase, it can be difficult. And I think that's one thing for everyone to be thinking about is these days with technology, it makes such a huge difference when you have that centralized project coordination and then roll it out to the plant level if you're in a multi-facility environment. I wanted to ask you, one question we get a lot, Mark, is about your last point, actually. So you're a super busy guy. You got tons of responsibilities. You're firefighting all day, flying all over the country. How do you go about getting the buy-in from the corporate staff, whether it's budget or just, making that 100-year shift from paper? Do you have any feedback or anything from there that you learned or that worked well for you in that process?
Well, I have to admit, I have a great supervisor who was really leaning in on this, and he was a big driver for that. So that was number one. And then, once you have that on board, obviously then that helps push the ideas throughout the organization. We had opportunities to have several meetings with plant management, with quality management. We introduced this at least twice to them over, say, a 6-month time frame, and we kept reinforcing what we were doing and what we were trying to achieve. And I think that was really one of the key learnings to getting the corporate people involved to help drive this message down to the plant.
Yeah, you did a great job on that. That's good to have support too. That never hurts, but I think you did a good job making sure everybody was heard and understood. So let's talk. We want to base this also in reality, right? We want some relevant stuff, and these projects are not easy, and they take time. And so I think looking back, conversely, there's also some things you might do different or that you've learned just through going through that process. You shared one about maybe early that you had made a quick pivot on in terms of the approach to the implementation. But you had a few others I thought were really important that would be helpful for others to probably save some pain. So you want to talk through a few of those things that you learned, you think?
Certainly. So when I mentioned we started in dairy, we also started with the program of raw receiving. If anybody's familiar with, a milk plant, that you're receiving raw milk from the farms, and so there's a whole process that you go through to make sure that the incoming supply of milk meets your requirements or legal requirements, et cetera. And so this was the very first program we started, and we thought it would be the easiest one to do. It was obviously very complex once we got into it. And so one of our key learnings was it's not really that consistent across all facilities. And so there is differences, and each facility did require some differences. So we need to make sure that we address those differences when we do the implementation process. So that was one of the key learnings that we had. Because then once you have that in place and you realize you need to make some corrections, you have to go back and obviously make changes.
Yep, for sure.
And then the Wi-Fi consideration, we talked about that already. Mm-hmm. And I'll just say that we didn't have Wi-Fi when we first started. We didn't have Wi-Fi for the first 8 months from when we kicked off the program. And so you're right, Brian, you are able to create records. You just can't submit them in real time until you get the tablets or the mobile devices into Wi-Fi coverage. And that, I think for some people was a little problematic because they were trying to really see where the records were, and if the devices couldn't submit, the records are not there yet, or not visible, say, to the QA manager in the facility. And so that was another key learning. So, making sure that how to address or understand how the records are submitted and where they can be found was a big learning for us. Okay. And then lastly, again, having people trained that can manage and edit the system, because as good as you think you are about rolling it out to begin with, you're always going to want to make some changes, and having the people who know how to do that, I think, has been critical for us.
No, that's good, and you have taken really great ownership of that, and that's I agree with that. That's a nice piece, and one of the things we're most proud of in the growth of our system is that configurability and that giving you the keys to do that. So those are really helpful. I think those could save some of us quite a bit of time as you look forward. So now as we kind of turn the corner here, looking back at what were some of the successes, what were some of the outcomes that we saw as a result of the implementation. And again, I do believe we're just seeing still the tip of the iceberg, but I thought it would be helpful because it's one thing to see demos and data sheets and all that stuff, but from your perspective, kind of seeing this, how it's actually making an impact in the organization. So this first slide here just kind of has them grouped in some areas. So I'm sure folks that are joining have something in mind. It might be about just compliance to start with, or for some it's about throughput and operational effectiveness and profitability. So can you talk through some of these and kind of what you are seeing already as improvements from the project?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first one there, productivity. Missing data, and we spent a lot of our time chasing forms in the facilities and trying to track down signatures and trying to fill in the empty blanks on some records that shouldn't be there. And so the system doesn't allow for missing data, and so that in itself is a big benefit because you don't really have to go track anything down; it's already there. Obviously, you pull up any computer can pull up access to all of the records that have been created, and you can see that any place. So that's a whole lot easier than trying to go out to the facilities and see actually what's happening. And then audit readiness and preparation, I think, is a piece where we haven't really touched on as much, but all of our facilities are GFSI certified, and many of the requirements in both the BRC and the SQF audits have key forms requirements in SafetyChain, and so they do link up very well. And one area where we're still also trying to, as you mentioned, tip of the iceberg, is fast and easy report creation. So we're really just now learning how to create reports, provide reports, show regulators the information when they come in through reports. And so that's really our next step for us in terms of productivity. On compliance, we have essentially, adopted the supplier approval process for FSMA for this. We have laid out all of our preventive controls. We are in the process of setting up master sanitation also in the tool. And clearly, you can see immediate visibility to any of the HACCP or preventive control checks that are required. And lastly, profitability, we're still working on that piece, but we know that because we do a lot of manual measurement, a lot of manual data collection, and rolling information up into a scorecard, this will really help us cut down a lot of time it takes to do that. And knowing that you are dealing with information in real time, you obviously can make decisions in real time instead of after the fact, and that's going to help in making sure you don't have products that go on hold. So it's really going to assist more in first pass quality.
That's great. And with that many plants and that many products, that many moving parts, that'll be really fun to see the continued impact there, that real-time decision making. So I think it's great to see again that as you went into the project, you had all these different ideas on what the scope was and why you were going into it, and it's great to see already some of the early returns and value you're getting from each of these areas from the implementation. And I think on this last slide, as we wrap up, I like to bring it back full circle. And again, as I got a chance to interview and talk a little bit, talking about kind of the drivers for the project, because we know for a lot of you, this might be the first really big initiative, or you're new at a company and you want to be that change agent, and you're kind of stepping out on faith a little bit, and you have to trust a partner like SafetyChain, and you got to make sure we can deliver. And these are the things that, your peers and your supervisor, in this case, Mark, are asking about. So I know these were themes that were important to you and that we're continuing to focus on as a partnership, but can you talk a little bit about what you feel like some of these big wins were for you as an organization after the implementation?
Yeah, definitely. And I touched on standardization already. Even though you can't necessarily standardize everything down to be exact, you do get a lot of standardization across the facilities. We have 2 ice cream manufacturing facilities that you can see we can easily have standardized the entire receiving process for raw materials in both of those plants. So those are the types of wins we saw, by being able to provide some standardization. Eliminating paper, and I was just in 2 of our facilities yesterday, and it was pretty clear to me that the operators who were using the tablets out on the production floor were delighted at the fact that they didn't have to manage the paper trail process anymore.
Sure.
So
yeah.
to me, and then they're not being asked all the time, where's your process control, where's your documentation, why didn't you sign this, and it just goes on and on. And so that piece has been taken care of completely. And then lastly, on end user adoption, it's not always a win-win where everybody's going to be on board with this. But once you show them what the benefits are, you will get the buy-in. I talked about the transparency and the audit readiness and operational effectiveness already, and clearly I think in terms of audit readiness and operational effectiveness, we're just, as you mentioned, getting into the tip of the iceberg on that. And we have some great expectations around using a lot of the data to drive some statistical decision making, and we have actually some great plans for that.
Very, very good. So you've talked a lot about the themes as you looked at the project going in, and I really appreciate you kind of pulling back the curtain so we can share some of the things that worked and some of the things that maybe you might have changed a little bit. Just out of curiosity for you, as somebody who's kind of at that higher level, who's looking at operations from a executive perspective, any takeaways for you? Anything that helps you sleep at night? Anything that's kind of changed fundamentally as you look back now, how it used to run versus now, and what you think about during the day versus what you have in your fingertips now to look at in terms of data?
for me, I obviously have been in this business a long time, and we, everywhere I've worked, we've been doing things basically the same way, and this finally gives us a chance to do it a different way. And so I see that as, one of the key things for, those who are just now coming into this business or who want to continue to grow their career, that, the opportunities for technology to help achieve your objectives is really there. And you just have to be open to that. So that was one of, for me, the big thing. And then, that when I, someday when I move on to the next phase in life, that I will know that I have at least helped do that for Albertsons.
That's good. I appreciate that. That's what we're there for. So we appreciate that. I know we've got a few questions, and Mark, if we have a couple of minutes, maybe I'll try and phrase these so they can help as many people as possible. Are you up for a couple of questions?
Certainly.
No math questions, I promise. We'll keep them as easy as we can. So I think one question that came in, you mentioned earlier about understanding each location, each facility is a little bit different, and that you made those adjustments through the course of the implementation. Do you have any feedback yet or suggestions on how you're now rolling up reporting with each of them potentially being slightly different, or how you're handling that, or have you worked through that yet?
We're still in the process of doing that, to be honest with you. And I'll go back to the one example of raw receiving. And a lot of the differences there was really around how people went back to look to make sure that something as important as the antibiotic testing was completed was actually documented and the record exists. And so that to me was one of the eye-opening things, that it's not all being done the same in every location. And then finally, believe it or not, regulators don't all see it the same way either. So you have to be a little cognizant of the fact that what a regulator may want to see when they come in their facility, that's a requirement. You have to be able to provide that. So that was one of the things about records and consistency.
No, that's a great point about the regulators. There's a lot of shifting going on there too with with all this being digitized. I think this question you covered pretty well about how the workforce is adapting to it. So I think you covered that pretty well. Question about data. So what type of data are you looking at on a day-to-day basis? I guess like more from your role, like what's important for you, what's in front of your eyeballs most of the time or consistently?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, if you think about the paperwork in the manufacturing facility, they're really all around process controls. And process controls, documenting activities that go on to support a standard operating procedure that you have. And, a process control can be as simple as, did we do the metal detector checks today? And have we followed them based on the SOP? And so that would be a process control that we would follow. So for me, I can go on to any laptop, sign in, and see if there was any misses in any of our metal detector checks through all 20 facilities. And you couldn't do that if you didn't have the system.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's great. Well, I think you've covered all the bases. There's a couple specific questions we'll take offline, but definitely appreciate the interest. I think you've covered a lot of ground that's been real helpful. And just want to thank you for, one, being a customer and a really great partner and telling a great story that I think is still yet to be completely written. As you mentioned, we've got some big plans together, and we're excited to be part of that. And really also appreciate you being willing to come on and kind of pull back the curtain a little bit and share what you guys have been doing. And hopefully we can have you back to maybe share more down the road as we dig into some of the next part of the adventure together. So thank you, Mark. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Brian.
And I want to thank all of you for joining. I hope you got some value out of this. We also host demo days. So if you want to see the technology in action, we're certainly happy to take you through that in a one-on-one conversation, or join us on our group demo days to kind of see more of what Mark's been referring to on the technology side. So we very much appreciate everyone making time during a very busy time of year. And we look forward to getting a chance to connect with each of you and learn more about how we might be able to help you out as well. So, Mark, thank you and your team, and thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you on the next one.